the meeting to order, City of University Heights City Council meeting. Today is August 13th, 2024. Welcome, everyone. We have 5 council present. Yes, and first order of business, approval of minutes. Is there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Mike circulated the minutes with his report. Hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. Any comments from the members of the public? Anyone like to speak? Can come up to the podium. Okay, thank you. We'll go on to the first order of business and thank Chair Pete Damiano for coming tonight to give a report about the zoning commission recommendations to council. Welcome, Pete. Do you want to join at the podium? And also welcome Alice, who's on zoning commission. Thank you, Alice, for coming.
All right, good evening, everyone. I think as many of you know, about a year and a half ago, there were issues that were brought from the city council to the zoning commission for us to do some background investigation on and check into some of these different issues. So over the last year and a half, we've been doing that. And we've been having multiple public meetings, as well as we had a public forum about a month ago to get some input from some other people. And so we're here tonight to bring forward what the zoning commission in coordination with Mr. Ballard have been talking about for your consideration. So I got a few slides to kind of walk through and hopefully help clarify. So the issues that were brought to us were about accessory dwelling units, about certain. Right now, currently, those are not allowed within University Heights. They are in Iowa City and a lot of other places around. And we were asked to look into that and sort of the pros and cons of that, if you will. The proportion of backyard that can have an outbuilding. There's been different interpretations of that over the years. And so we've been looking into that and what that is. The proportion of yard that can be paved, and that came from, and I'll walk through each of these in a little more detail. The concern about pavement in the front yard for rentals in particular and people parking, but then it had some number of these that really have unintended consequences from what it seems like the original intent was. And so that's what we're kind of bringing forward to your consideration. And then this rezoning of the Swisher track right now, it's still currently zoned for single family, and did not seem like that was any longer the interest of the members of the community once the city bought it. So just kind of walk through each of these, and please stop me at any point for any kind of further consideration. As I mentioned, these were things originally brought to us. We've been working on those, and then we've also been in consultation with the municipal planning organization, which is at the county level. Louisa's, I think, chaired that one of their groups, right? And so they're basically here to provide input for city and county government on different issues. So process that we can go through. So I'm going to show you first a few slides that the MPO, they came and presented to us. We asked for some background information from them on what's been going on in the areas before we went any further. And it is sort of interesting. So the ADUs is what they used to often kind of refer to as mother-in-law's units or something like that. But they're actually, it can be multiple types of units. But the main thing is that they're basically an independent housing unit, but it can be within a home, it can be in a separate unit, etc. So I'm just going to show you a few things that they brought to us. So one of those has to do with the owner and occupancy. And you could structure this in terms of how they could be done in lots of different ways. The way that Iowa City used to do it is that it used to be that the owner had to be living on site in one of the 2 different places. So they actually have had these for about 20 years. And one of the things the MPO came and said, basically they get maybe 1 request a year for these things. So it's not like by opening this up, there was this floodgate of interest. In fact, within the last 2 years, they've all of a sudden made the rules much, much more open. We're not proposing that, especially as we're starting to consider this. But the idea was that you had someone who would live on site and have they could be in either of the 2. They could be in the smaller unit or they could be in the larger one. But basically what they've said is that basically controls sort of who then is in the other one, because you've got to live with that person. And so the function is, again, that it must function independently from the principal dwelling unit, have its own entrance, its own kitchen, bathroom facilities, those kinds of things. Often, but it doesn't have to, they have to have their own utilities. Obviously, easier if you're gonna do that, be able to charge the rent for the use of the utilities, but that's not necessarily something that would have to be done, but it could be. The arrangements, as I said, it could be a completely detached, it could be above a garage, it could be attached on the side, it could be a basement. Our basement, I believe, at one time was one of these, did not necessarily have a separate entrance, but when we bought the house 34 years ago, it had been set up as if that would be a separate apartment. Converted garage, so it can be a lot of these different types of structures. And the size, again, that's something that could be, it would be up to the city council to decide what the size is, but typically they don't exceed 50% of the floor area of the primary residence, so they are supposed to be smaller. And you could cap that in Iowa City. The floor area of the ADU is not to exceed 50% of the total floor area of the principal dwelling, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. And the dimensional standards, basically, you have to still make the structure to fit whatever the other housing requirements are, or the regular standards, if you will. And same with the character, whatever character standards are in terms of what it would look like, would be whatever, you know, would be for the other, any other unit within the city. And parking, usually it's required that there is one additional site. Iowa City does not require that, but that is something that could be done. And so, what we are proposing or suggesting for consideration, next one, and that's just if you did want more information on the ADUs, there's a lot of good resources out there. And so this was brought to us originally because of concerns about aging in place and being able to have a younger, one of your daughter's son or something living nearby, and or, could be in either of those. And so that's why it was originally brought to us. It was not brought to us because of wanting more revenue or anything like that, but it was raised that a younger family also could potentially use one of these as a way to get a little bit of income to be able to live in the area. But it was really designed about younger families being able to stay in place or being able to age in place is why it was brought to us. And so what we were suggesting, as you consider this, again, totally up to you, but to go back to some of the more, I'm going to say more rigid approach to this, where you still would say the owner would have to live on site and own both of the units. So it's not like you're selling off one of those. 1 bedroom maximum, 2-person occupancy, has to function independently, would have a parking space and not use as short-term rental, and only 1 per lot. And this is again, going back to what Iowa City had been doing before, but because they do want more, they've loosened some of these, but as a start, our suggestion would be to consider doing it, in this more, what we call with guardrails on, just to try it out and see. What they were saying is that by the time you start factoring in the cost of building this, putting in the utilities, all those kinds of things, it's not like you're gonna make a ton of money off of this. You have a whole lot. Any questions about anything around the ADUs? I will say, when we had the public forum, there were some people that were concerned that also we were gonna be opening this can of worms about new rentals and all of this, but that was before we kind of set, or we got to the point of having the discussion about that, really not talking about opening this up to anything, but really doing this in a very confined way.
Does this require a separate 911 address for detached dwellings or not? Share the same address?
Good question.
Yeah, I don't know, Doug, whether we really talked about that. I guess just to really answer your question, I think that would involve in the particular 911. I think we'd have to talk to emergency services about that, I mean, for mail, you'd want to know if it's this,
Well, yeah.
yeah,
Good
and
point.
so I don't know the answer to that,
We could certainly ask the MPO and ask what they do in Iowa City,
yeah.
but in fact, So the person who did the presentation, Sarah Wall, she said she has one right next door. And she doesn't even know that's there. But there would have to be obviously some sort of an act of something from the health.
And I suppose they take their insurance or proof of insurance for an outside building, or because that's required. That
I would certainly, the thing is, yeah, that whoever owned that would have to be a part of what they would be. Right,
Just be different than like a rental agreement, and just be up to the homeowner and the tenants that will live in it too, on their own.
right, in terms of, yeah, whether that would fall under our rental agreement. Yeah, no, I won't throw that. So with all of these issues that we talked about, so we had these discussions. And then we talked to Steve in terms of, okay, what would it take if we were to make these changes to the city or to the zoning ordinance? And he has crafted some language that could be introduced to be able to do, this, should you want.
Are you making a recommendation on the utilities, whether they're separate?
We didn't feel like you really needed to, because that sort of would take care of itself. If the owner really wants to take care of all of the utilities, it doesn't seem like that's really a zoning requirement, not a requirement, but you certainly could. And I would think I don't think that would be a smart thing, but. Any other thoughts, or things that come to mind that I can just mention what we had talked about?
I'm not a council member, but I'm curious, when you said you did discussions with Iowa City, they were loosening the rules to have more of them. I guess I'm just curious why they were thinking that, or what the incentive was for them on that.
Why they'd want more of them.
Yeah,
So some of the discussion is a little bit of higher density and better use of land, and some of it, people concerned about things like climate change, and again, trying to be a little bit more efficient with the land use.
And I think in
Affordable
addition,
housing.
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
affordable housing.
I just said affordable housing too.
I think all those things, and then I think what the word that the commission received from the MPO folks was that the initial regulations that allowed this, they really weren't getting many takers.
Yeah.
So that was actually part of the message that came from the MPO was, it's not like the floodgates opened and people just rushed to do this. It was kind of the opposite. And that's one of the reasons they decided to recommend loosening some of the requirements to see if they can maybe encourage more people to do this if some of these things were the hang on. But the other reasons were, I think, the real genesis of it.
And then one more, don't
Yeah,
they,
no,
probably, is that, do these need to be ADA compliant or handicap accessible in a way, or is that again up to the homeowner?
The building, so that's a good question too. Doug, building code provisions, housing code provisions are gonna apply. I mean, ADA compliance for a private home isn't a requirement, so I doubt that they would have to be,
Like emergency services, if they have to bring a stretcher through somebody's backyard, I mean,
right.
is accessible for emergency vehicles or.
One of the provisions that we have in the proposed language is that you'd have to get a rental regardless of whether you were actually renting it as such. And so that's gonna involve review by, Terry as a building official or Brian as a housing official, application, of all those various codes.
Mhm.
So I don't know the answer to your specific question about stretcher, but I'm guessing that's something to look at.
And the structure would definitely have to meet. So if the building code does have ADA accessibility. Thoughts, concerns? Okay, so the second one was about the proportion of the backyard they can have an outbuilding. And so right now, the way it's written is only 30% of the backyard can be taken up by a garage or an outbuilding. But currently, the zoning language is interpreted that any building that touches that backyard space, the entire building gets counted as in that space. And so our interpretation of the original intent was that they wanted to be able to keep some green space in somebody's backyard, and so only wanted to take up 30% of the backyard. But right now, if a foot of the building touches in that backyard space, and I'll show you a little diagram of that, the whole thing gets counted. So, Mike, if you want to, let's go to the next slide there. So this is actually a picture from the zoning ordinance from ordinance 79. And I put in that little dark area there, which would be like an outbuilding or garage. And so the backyard is technically 30 feet from the back property line, kind of drawn straight across. So that dotted line up there is considered the backyard. And so that building there, because it touches into that backyard space, the whole building gets counted rather than just the proportion that's in the backyard. So clearly that does not take up 30% of the backyard, but if you were to count the whole thing, it might. And we've had several instances of that in the last few years, where that's come into question. And according to Steve, the way that the zoning ordinance is currently written, it's not like you could get a variance for that because it wouldn't be allowed. And so then what we had suggested is, or asked Mr. Ballard to come up with what is some language that could be done to clarify that. So it would be just the proportion of the building that's in it that would get counted toward that 30%. So a number of these things we're talking about are pretty narrow kinds of issues that will come up, but they're concerns of different people in the neighborhood, so we wanted to try to address it. So any questions about that, or does that make sense?
There's no limit, Steve, there's no limit on the size of the garage if you have it, so.
There is, I mean, there's a building coverage limitation in the zoning ordinance, so there's also, I mean, what Pete was just talking about, yeah, that size limitation. Setbacks. I
But
guess,
there's height width
yeah, but it's really gonna be.
that are
building
separate
coverage.
from what we're talking about here. This would not change the height width limits in terms of the size of the building. The height or the width, just how much of the backyard it can take up. And how it's counted, basically.
My understanding is that according to Terry, this is how Iowa City interprets it. That same. So-
More this way,
Yeah.
yes, this is
That's right.
from, right, and several of the other communities that he tipped in and some of the others. There's also another way where you could make it 15% of the whole lot and all those kind of things. We didn't want to go that far. Again, this was just sort of an initial attempt to try to clarify what the original intent was.
I'm looking at the drawings and the end of the zoning ordinance.
Are you looking for height or are you looking for coverage?
I'm looking at coverage, building footprint, and then there are all the setbacks,
Setbacks, right?
but you can build. You can fill the area inside the setbacks.
To the extent of the coverage limitation. So.
It would help or not with roughly, we've got this. That rectangle up there above the dotted line. Right? And so, let's just say a third of it would be about this. And so if that whole thing was taken up by the garage, that would be the maximum that would be allowed. And still would be, that's not changing. It's just that this part that is not included in there would no longer be counted as in that space.
So the building coverage, so the buildings, main dwelling, accessory structures where can't exceed 40% of the lot,
The entire,
the entire lot. Yeah, that's right. And then, of course, where can that 40% exist? Well, setbacks, you know, required, rear yard, those kinds of things. So, but that's the size limitation.
Thank you.
Okay, the third had to do with paving, as I mentioned earlier, so the zone is written to prevent not too much paving in the front yard with rentals. And, you know, we've got a couple that are sort of pushing it, if you will, down on Gulfview there. But it's not a third of that, but the way that, and I'll let Steve talk about the specific of the, but basically right now, because of the way you calculate the paving, it's limited somebody who wanted to just put a patio in the backyard. Has nothing to do with parking, you can't even get a car around to there, but because of the way that the language is written right now, it stops some people putting a patio in, which obviously is not the original intent. So just trying to get to not understanding why somebody didn't want everyone to pave their front yards, but at the same time, we felt someone should be able to have a patio. So again, very narrow in terms of what the change would be here, just like the last one. And again, another very narrow one is with a side yard setback. So we've got some people, and a lot of these really have to do with the older part of town and with the smaller lots and the homes. Like, you know, so a couple of people where the homes are right on the property line and wanted to age in place and wanted to build an addition on the back of their house. But currently, the zoning ordinance, they were grandfathered in to be able to have the house built on the property line, but they weren't gonna be able to put the addition on it. And then it was limiting them in such a way that they really couldn't put on a functional addition. So we asked Steve to come up with some language for a very limited number of places where somebody has a house right on the property line and wanted to build an addition back. They'd basically be able to continue where the house is now, moving it back with all the current building codes and everything else. Fire protection, all that for neighbors and things like that.
I think those side yard setbacks are limit, you know, fire spreading from one to another, so is there any exception? If there's a house there, I guess if there's already a house
Right,
there.
so we asked Terry about that specifically, and he said there's new construction rules basically, and you have to meet those with double firewall and double drywall and all that kind of stuff for fire protection, so we can't count it. So as long as you meet the current code for building construction, it should be fine. And then the last one is on the Swisher Tract, and then in just suggesting that the zoning be changed from single family to something like parkland, and Steve did a lot of work trying to figure out what we could possibly change it to. Because there isn't just sort of a natural, this is what it should change to. And Steve, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Not much. I mean, we were looking at different ways to define public space or uses for public space. Didn't really come up with a lot. As it stands now, Swisher Tract, the Triangle Park, they're in the R1 zone. The R1 zone provides for permitted use parks. You know, in my view, if the council wants to make a public zone designation, I think it's certainly okay. I don't know that it gets you a lot right now, but for the future it might. You know, and it does put you on record as saying, you know, this is the public zone. But there's not a lot that the proposal says.
So all of these are really pretty modest. There's nothing that we're suggesting there's some major change or anything like that, but just updating things, and it felt like a lot of things were zoned for function rather than could we address the function, like the safety of how the house was built. If it was too close, or, you know, it's closer, yeah, that can be dealt with, etc. So that's what we kind of brought in our these folks and for enforcement issues and other kinds of things as we had these discussions, just to kind of make sure that if there were enforcement things, that those could be done. City's in a little different place than it was the last time a lot of these zoning ordinances were put in place in terms of the function. Mayor, police force, house, construction and all this stuff.
I wanted to see if Alice, as a zoning member, had any comments or anything you wanted to tell council. Pete did a good job, didn't he?
I do want to really thank the zoning commission members. Again, we've had many, many meetings. They've been very positive and really just trying to work, you know, on how can we come
Absolutely.
to a good place of compromise.
Absolutely.
And
Thank
to
all
Steve
of
for
You
all of his
for
work on this too. So if this is something that the city council would want to do, Steve, what's the process?
Yeah, so the council has various options, and I kind of outlined them, I think, in my report, but you know, you can tell me to start drafting stuff, but it isn't gonna take too long, because I've already got it pretty well drafted, but then bring it back for consideration. These are changes to the zoning ordinance. So there would have to be a public hearing, the notice would have to be published in the Press Citizen of a public hearing, and then there would be 3 required readings. The council might, you know, wanna just think about it for a month, maybe try to get the word out more. As I said in my report, I think, the zoning commission did have a community meeting, that was facilitated, in part by the MPO on, May 30, I believe it was. And so there were community members that attended, I don't know, 20 something, people. So, you know, whatever the council's desire, if you want to move forward, I can draft something and it can be on next month's agenda if you want that. If you want to move slower than that, for any reasons and to, you know, try to invite more public comment before you even put it on an agenda, you can do that. Really, whatever you want to do.
What does council suggest?
I guess I tend to think 2, 4, and 5 are pretty easy ones, but I think 5 involves zoning change, so that would probably make sense to do at the same time as 1. 3 might be fine. I gotta have to think more about that, I guess, and understand the scenarios where the patios, so you're hearing from people that want, and I saw what was in the written materials, but
Yeah, that,
Sounds like-
that's what was brought to us as a
Specific needs.
concern from the city council. Again, none of these are widespread issues. These are a few places where you run into that because of the smaller lots traditionally, and then all of a sudden they start calculating things out and then they can't have a patio. So it's not like you're gonna have 50 people who are gonna rush in and start more patios. At least that's not the impression that we.
So you're thinking 2, 4, and 5 are fairly easy.
I'd be curious to know what the rest of council thinks. I think those are pretty straightforward.
I think they've done a lot of really good work for us already. And I'd like to put it on the agenda for next month,
September 10th
for September 10th,
for more
for
discussion
more discussion, yeah.
and invite some people from the public
Sure.
in.
Sure.
Yeah,
We get more public input.
what do you,
Required.
No, I think public input would be beneficial. I think there's a sense of urgency here with respect to these topics.
I mean, really, council's only got to look at this a short while and kind of can talk to their neighbors and all and see how it works, but so I seem to hear we'll go ahead and put it on the September 10th agenda. And then we can make a decision about if we want the staff to move forward with something then. Is that what you think, Nick?
Yeah, if we're not in a hurry, might as well not give people the impression that we're gonna be voting on something if they are just learning about it, you know, over the next month. Again, the only exception I can think is if 2, 4, and like at least 2 and 4, if those weren't controversial at all, I don't know that. But you could just handle them all at the same time too. I don't really have a strong preference.
I think the patio, I saw that come through when it was applied for, and it was a house that, you know, there's the 30-foot rear yard setback. And their house was, say, 12, 15 foot from that rear yard setback. They could have built the house all the way back to the setback and not exceeded their overall area, buildable area on the site. But they wanted to put a 15-foot patio, which extended a couple feet into that rear yard setback. Because of the way the zoning ordinance is written. That whole patio had to be less than 1/3 of just the rear yard setback. Or less than 30% or whatever it is. So. Even though they could build a house there, they couldn't build a patio that big, or just a little bit bigger than that. But if they would have built the house there, they could have built a patio that went another 10 feet. So it just seemed. So they're just saying, if it does hit the rear yard setback, then the whole patio.
Are you talking about 2? Does 2 relate to 3?
No,
Well, it can, just like.
I just didn't
we're
know-
Talking about, you could build your house back into that setback area. And that whole house wouldn't get counted in there, but if an unattached garage is a foot in, the whole garage gets counted. So there are these things that they do cross a little bit, but not entirely.
I guess I'm just wondering, if we changed 2 with the 30% issue. Does that impact the patio issue at all?
Not going by numbers.
Oh, I see. If we change the 30, clarify the interpretation that just
Oh,
getting
right.
into the back third. Doesn't pull the whole structure in, it just
Yeah.
just count the part that's in the third, that doesn't relate to the patio.
Well, you sent the report, and maybe you might not have had a chance to look at it, but there's suggested language. You'd sent that to them, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what the change would be. Again, it's pretty minimal. I mean, again, I'm not trying to overly advocate for whatever you're going to do. But if you look at the suggested change that Steve made on the patio and the proportion, it's just a slightly different way of looking at it. That would clarify for this situation. I think what Tim was talking about, there's just these unintended consequences that have come up because if somebody wanted to do something in the past, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, that's not really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, with it on being on the agenda, everybody can look at it further. They can maybe contact you or anybody and
Yeah, absolutely. And if you
contact
want
you
us-
and Steve.
Yeah, and if you want us to do any more looking into any of this, we'd be happy to do that or give you more information in terms of what we did as.
Yeah, you've been very generous with your time
Oh, that-
in doing all this 1.5 year work, and I know all the work you've been doing, and you've done it, you've got additional work in other meetings too, with the MPO and everything, and we're very happy with all the work you've done and grateful to you and your commission members for working on this all this time. And I think we have your contact information,
You know, we're trying.
and we know where you live. We know where you live. And so we're meeting September 10th because this is a voting evening here, that we're meeting at the hotel on the first floor meeting room.
Unfortunately, we are out of town that night.
Oh, okay.
But if there is anything you need prior to that, I would be happy to.
Okay, very good. But thanks again
Okay, yeah, thank
for
you.
everything.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
you got
Thanks, Pete. So is that satisfactory for council?
Put it on
Lisa?
the agenda
Yeah.
as a discussion.
And then, yeah, and have further discussion, have more time to review this. and ask Steve questions, Pete questions, Alice questions. Any of the zoning commission, and then we can look at it more thoroughly. I know it's just been about a week's notice, maybe few less days. But anyway, we'll keep on going to legal reports. Steve, do you have anything additional to your report?
The only thing I wanted to mention, Nick and I sort of looked at an issue as lawyers. I think Nick involved Doug as it's streets and sidewalks. There was an Iowa Supreme Court case that came out this summer where the Supreme Court said that if a city tries to impose or shift the responsibility for the liability for injuries that would occur on a sidewalk, for the failure to maintain the sidewalk, like it's uneven or broken up or whatever. If the city wanted to shift the liability for that onto the adjoining property owner, the city can't do that. Okay, the city can make the adjoining property owner repair and reconstruct or whatever's needed for a sidewalk. But if the city doesn't do that and the sidewalk's in disrepair, or if the city does that, but it's still something happens and somebody, you know, have to file a lawsuit, say, I'm injured because of this condition of this sidewalk, I'm gonna sue the city. There was a case not too many years ago in Iowa City where the same court, but with different members, said, yeah, if the city shifts that responsibility to the adjoining property owner, which in that case was the University of Iowa, yeah, you can do that. And then, as of a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court said, no, you can't. So, a couple things that points up. One, I did contact the League of Cities because that's the sort of thing that people at the League of Cities pays close attention to. And my guess is they already have an effort underway to approach people in the legislature to say, hey, the Supreme Court said we can't do this, cities can't do this because the law, the statutes don't let us. So just change the statutes. Legislature can do that whenever they want. I don't have any idea if there's an appetite for that. I guess we'll see, because I'm very confident. I haven't heard back from the league, but I'm very confident somebody will be talking about it. The second thing is then, okay, given that the court has been clear now, okay, this is a city responsibility and it's the city liability if somebody proves the city didn't maintain sidewalks. Is there something the city should do to take a look at the condition of sidewalks? I know Doug does that at least annually and probably a lot more than that informally. In the past, I know there were efforts where the through Josiah, I think before Ryan's time, I think the effort was to break the city into quadrants and kind of do a quadrant every year or something to really kind of look at sidewalk condition and you know, I know in the past, the council has engaged contractors to repair sidewalks and offered homeowners, property owners, you know, sort of a discount rate, if you want to say it that way, that, hey, there's going to be somebody that we've selected. If you want to sign on, you don't have to. You have to repair your sidewalk. If you don't want to use our guy, that's fine, but our guy might, he's going to be in the neighborhood kind of thing. So I know that there've been some efforts. I don't think that's happened for some years, but anyway, that came up as an issue. And I guess this is something that I thought I would raise as something the council might want to think about. You know, the city has adequate insurance coverage, if something were to happen. Lots of times, you know, you want to focus on safety as opposed to paying for it if somebody gets hurt. So, you know, it's not just a liability issue, but it's a safety issue. And I don't really have any reason to think that the condition of sidewalks in the city are such that what Doug's doing now isn't adequate, but I don't go around as much as Doug and look, so I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that generally to the council.
May need to be places and bonded now if the sidewalk guru.
I don't think so.
Well, that's what I was kind of saying too, but it's like something we should have the engineer walk, you know, to make sure that if there's any, yeah, kind of higher standard and not to put so much on Doug, but that.
As I recall, Josiah had a intern do some of
Yeah,
that.
I think previously they had a program like Steve was saying, where they were proposing to do that.
According to the
for
guidelines.
years. Kind of have a map, like different areas to inspect. I don't know all the history of it, but my understanding is that there was pushback in the community, especially because some properties don't have sidewalks. And so that program was disbanded, at the direction of council at some point. So we've not been doing that since I've been a shop battery in 2020, since 2020 for sure.
We were trying to remember too what that was, and I felt like after the pushback, it might have been that we thought with the hotel motel tax coming, that we were gonna be able to afford to do the quadrants or whatever and have the city actually pay for it, so that we weren't putting it kind of for those reasons, kind of unfairly on maybe some homeowners and not others.
Yes.
That's your
And,
memory.
and
Yes.
I do remember council members walking the older part of the city and saying, if we just had just exactly what Nick said, but they also said, we need to repair it in a big, long strip because it would still be unleft. Can you address that, Lisa?
Happily, yes.
I mean,
Ad nauseam. Yeah, like. On my side of Kozer in our block, it's an old sidewalk and it does all kinds of weird stuff. And when we redid our driveway, our concrete whisperer said, well, I can't address the issues with your sidewalk because it has to meet the neighbors. And the neighbors are a bigger mess than mine. And so we talked with Josiah at the time about let's include sidewalks with the street projects.
right,
And Kozer was agreeing to someday fix that block of Kozer and address the sidewalks. But I think what I've talked with Ryan about, and I think you too, is the sidewalk, I mean, the street has been temporarily patched. The sidewalk needs to be addressed, but it needs to be addressed in a longer strip, maybe not the entire side, but a longer strip than just me doing this panel over and over and over because it's just wonky. Every winter, it's a different thing.
It seems like the water drainage and the watershed, your street runs over the sidewalk and then it just becomes liquefied and the sidewalks are just all constantly moving every year, different.
And it's a drainage issue that there's no wonderful solution to except tearing that block out and moving it all, right?
Yeah, I mean, on Kozer in Lisa's block specifically, there's the foundations for the homes are sort of below the street grade. Or very level with it, so it's the way things are built right now, it's not an easy fix, and especially with the amount and size of mature trees on the block. The impact we would have to those trees to excavate and lower the street in order to try to fix that grading issue would be significant. So or potentially significant to that block, which is always, I mean, with me coming on and hearing from Josiah, that was always a big concern and so that's. It hasn't presented like an easy fix of this, right,
Right.
to that situation. So, you know, a project is probably gonna take some creativity. It may be bigger if we're looking at like not just rebuilding the sidewalk, but trying to do a long-term fix to the drainage, which is probably how we prefer to do that. If we're gonna undertake something larger there, so.
But some of the neighbors, I'm not speaking for all of them, but some of them that were pretty vocal. Oh, I mean, that was a long time ago, that didn't want curbs in the street reconstructed.
oh yeah, a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. Because of the trees, they're now saying, okay, we need to get this fixed and the trees. You know, we'll have to take the chances.
So.
So that's, you know,
So maybe you can,
That Let's see,
Maybe you
First
should
Street.
look
Yeah.
into it about an intern. You know what
Yeah,
I
all my
mean? And
interns are gone now.
Oh, they're all gone?
Yeah, the one we had in our group left last week, to go back, well, get rid of.
Oh,
it, to go
yeah,
back to
it's like,
school.
Next summer?
Yeah, yeah. Summer, I mean, yeah, I mean. It would probably be a short timeline to like do an evaluation and bid it and get it done yet this fall if we were gonna do a project, so it'd have, I mean, yeah, it'd be something maybe we could. We could walk this fall in a certain spot and try and find the area that we would focus on first. And see if it could be bid to be rebuilt next summer.
Or even if some areas need to be shaved off because they stick, I don't know what the precise issue would be.
Yeah. Right, yeah, I mean, so. I guess what I would want to know ahead of time is this is a city project, right? That we have council direction to like turn this into a city project. It's not an assessment project. So that, I think that would be good for me to know going into that also.
Yeah.
Because there's things that go into those assessment sidewalk projects, you know, like we have to send letters and get people
Yeah,
notice and things
right.
like that. And so we have to make
This
up
isn't the time of
forms
year.
and things. Just to clarify for people what we're sending them, right? So.
I think to me, sorry. I was gonna say, I think the goal in the short term would be to identify anything that is very unreasonably dangerous. So we could, if it's like a quick fix sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then I think, yeah, the longer term plan is get into the budget. And have council decide at some point if we're gonna have it be assessed to the homeowner, but that's. I'm not saying that can't be redecided, but I think last time after the pushback, it was kind of like, no, we're. Hopefully gonna be able to afford to do these projects, so, you know, for the reasons you stated, I think was that. Is it fair that the people who host the sidewalks then have that burden? I know that a lot of towns do it that way, but.
But we're in University Heights and we don't.
Yeah, so
And one of,
I
one of the issues. I think that was 2019. Was. I mean, they have engineering standards, like perfection. And this gets marked and this gets marked, and I remind Josiah frequently of that little hole in my sidewalk that I didn't get the patch in before they looked at it. I was like, no, you have to replace that entire panel. So people look at, okay, it's a little spalled, but it's not crumbling, it's not, but you still have to replace it, and that's part of it. There's such strict standards that got marked that was part of it.
Yeah, and I mean, so when we're talking about legal liability and a safety standard, we're gonna have to set a limit to it, right? And there may be maybe council wants to give us direction on what they feel that what is reasonable. I mean, I've worked for the city of Corbo where we use 3/4 of an inch basically as that threshold for a tripping hazard or a gap or cracking. I think Iowa City's at least used to be 1 inch, so I mean. 1 inch is pretty significant when you walk up and you see, I mean, there's a big difference between 3/4 and 1 inch. I mean, 3/4 seems bad, it catches someone's toe. So, yeah, I mean,
how expensive is grinding, like things like that, to make them just work for now?
yeah, I don't have a good feel on that. It could probably be fairly expensive, but it would be cheaper than the whole replacement, certainly. You know, that's something I'd probably have to just call some guys to see if they could do stuff like that, you know. But, I mean, there is one location I can think of right now where there's like a tree root that's lifted us 2 sidewalk panels, basically 4 inches above where they're supposed to be. They're raised off above the ground. So, I mean, there's gonna be scenarios like that where we're gonna have to cut the tree root to get it back to grade, right? So. Just. There's gonna be a response, I guess, I'm assuming. for
We
things
fixed
like that.
one before Josiah left, and you were probably here too at George and Kozer, that corner, Andy. And
Yeah, but
corner
the
that had
homeowner
a
had-
tree root.
Yeah, the homeowner, yeah, was involved and was agreeable to everything there, and we actually got a access easement signed from that property owner because they asked for the sidewalk to be rerouted
that's
around that tree. So the sidewalk goes on their private property, but they provided an access easement, public access easement for that. So that's how we resolved that.
I haven't received any complaints more recently, you know, and sometimes we all do, you know what I mean? So people say this is a bad spot, and I always look at it, I mean, within in the fall, maybe? Ryan, I contacted you because a lady who lived in Iowa City was running, and it was in a newer sidewalk, part of, you know, like the OUP, and she tripped and fell, and she called me and said, I'm fine, but I don't want this to happen to anyone. And I said, this is a fairly new sidewalk. We need to get this fixed. And because we had contractors, you got it fixed within like 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Yeah, we got lucky on that one. Yeah,
Yeah, and
I think it was just
And
across the
so-
street here.
I do pay close attention when there is a complaint or something to, let's see what we can do to get this fixed, but not everybody calls or tells you.
Right.
And
Yeah, we already had a contractor for Oak Crest and Mahaska intersection work, so there's actually two locations, one on the corner here at Sunset and Melrose and one. Off of Marietta.
yeah, Marietta,
but
that was repaired too.
Yeah, we prepared both of those with using the same contract.
Do you have a sense of the cost of engineering time to just do an initial like overview to see what we're even talking about from like a 3/4 inch standard?
I mean, just to walk it and mark property numbers or something, or like fill out forms, inspection forms and stuff, I guess. Is that
Yeah, just to see like what,
for the whole city? I guess I wouldn't know. I could try to put it together and estimate that.
I mean, does council think that's a good way to start? I mean, I hear different options, like it could be kind of more complaint driven. But I like Steve's point of like, it's not just the insurance paying for someone that gets hurt, but like being a little out
This time
front.
of
on
year
it.
is tough. We should maybe start it in the early spring. I don't know about doing it this time of year, but
And that is true, the freezing and thawing could
Yeah.
have a different ballgame, and so it's,
Right, I mean, we could certainly do an initial inspection and see if there's anything egregious, like you said, like, I could maybe contact a few small contractors and see if they're grind or something like that, or if we could just do a single panel, if that. If there was that situation, but, yeah, as far as a larger project, I'd say we probably wanna wait till next summer to do that, but, and I guess it would be like, are we talking about some panels on this first round and then we would review doing larger blocks? Cause I know one comment was. Let's do bigger stretches and do, half a block at a time or something and rebuild it, so it's all even, so. And there'd be more cost involved doing a project like
Oh,
that,
yeah.
right, too, so.
I was thinking that
Square footage.
the egregious is what I would, like the egregious now and then like work toward budgeting for a bigger project in the
Yeah.
future. Is what, and that's what I was,
If it was walked, to find the egregious areas, could they kind of map out the priority areas for the full replacement at the same time? And it just,
For the long stretches, you're saying?
yeah,
Yeah, we could probably just do that. I mean, or if there was input, from council members of like which areas that have kind of historically been noted or complained about.
North side Marietta is, it's all over the place.
The north side of area.
I usually do in the fall around 1st of September, I do storm drains and my walkthroughs. So I can usually get between my wife and back 80, I think we could have them all done by Friday.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Doug just wants to provide us some locations, like this address or this address, or like our emergency spots, we could move forward from there, even with that information.
I think it has to be focused more on like in your area in Melrose, in the east end of. I mean, I can walk my street, no sidewalks, either side, mine's done. And,
We could just get rid of sidewalks.
Yeah.
Everybody could walk.
and, you know. And we've paid close attention to, also the sidewalks going to Horn School. We've always kind of watched those, and you've watched those. And paid attention to that, and so I think concentrating maybe. On your side. I don't know. Doug, you can check out. Our side.
Yeah. I'll check that out.
Okay. But. I think it's a good. Warning to get back to doing something on looking at sidewalks. I think that's a very good thing. And we're gonna have to add it into budget things or something too.
Yeah.
You know, with our street repairs. And Lisa's been talking about that for a while. With me about doing some sidewalk repairs.
Since.
Yeah. Okay,
I thought it was just kosher, not any.
So nothing for Ryan right now.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, do you want anything, do you want us to take any action on doing any walking, or maybe I'll wait for Doug to
Well,
do a review? and
I
then he
think,
can
like he
provide-
said, find out the real difficult, bad spots. And I think you can kind of see them in general.
When you start seeing 2 and 3 panels grow, that's when you say, this is gonna be a big project, or it's just one kicked out, you know, that can be, like, say, brown, or one panel replacement. But when you have 3 or 4 connected together, that's gonna be a bigger project.
Some of the little things like the, you know, sidewalk cracks, giant balloons balloon. For the sidewalks that get narrowed, even narrower that. They're never edged. The cracks goes up. Is that a concern? Clumps of gravel.
Grass,
Do you have enough direction? No?
I don't know if grass, I can handle that. Grass growing between panels.
Steve, is that an issue where the, like you, as a homeowner, have to maintain your sidewalk so that it's not, doesn't have weeds coming up tripping people? Or not really?
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess, our mowing ordinance probably would. Speak to that to some extent, depending on how they're coming, how the vegetation's coming up.
What do you see in these, I know in Melrose, there's one that has a bunch of weeds coming out. but you probably see
Feel
it.
that kind of
Well,
thing, I guess. City
Oh,
clerk.
but there's the salad.
Tends to go to the housing
It's where
inspector.
it's some-
Right, that's what-
Yeah.
Sure, but. Gotten really narrow. We talked about that. Remember,
East of
I
Sunset,
think
on the inside. But there are places where they just, you know, the really small. Oh, I was just.
I guess for clear direction, I would be up for Ryan to communicate with Doug to make sure they find the problem areas that either, I guess, weeds or concrete is sticking up. If you guys are willing to do that, that would be good with me. Sure.
Where'd your fall?
Yeah, and I don't know, I can try to check, but I think Mike was saying maybe Brian Jensen would be the one that would do enforcement for sort of overgrowth and
The
weeds
weeds.
and stuff. I don't think that's normally something.
That's a good idea.
Hear from
Brian.
But yeah, so if we, I guess if we find something, we can put some addresses. Maybe send Brian an email on that.
Come back September 10th and we'll see where you are on that. Doug, you and Brian,
go for a walk sometime.
thank you. So Steve, was that everything?
Yes.
Okay, Mike has a clerk report that he sent around. Do you have any comments?
I don't think so. Since I sent the report, we've gone over 100 rental permit renewals, which puts us almost You know, we're getting in the 40-45% mark. I send a reminder usually on August 15th. You know, permits are due August 31st. We usually give them a grace period till mid-September before we start saying increased fines, but we're good response. Good response.
Any questions for Mike? Okay, John, you sent around the treasurer's report and the warrant list, and you added a few. Is there any more additions you have since
No.
then?
No, there was one, I did do a follow-up email, there was one correction,
Yeah,
because there was a resident that paid too much for a parking permit.
yeah.
I think Chris and Mike gonna help on that, so.
So the warrants list were sent. Are there any of?
Ohio and then want the resident permit.
Oh, that's what it is.
Don't list that as your address.
Are there any objections to paying the warrants? Having none, the warrants will be paid by unanimous consent. Thank you. Any questions for John? I know you've been meeting with Steve Cool, right?
Oh, yeah, no, he's been great. They're trying to do the best sponge I can, so we got got that gas in 77. They showed me the template, so I filled it out, and I kept the recipe. We will send it to Mike for publication, so. And then there's some more. See, mentoring sessions that occur later this year.
Okay, very good. Any questions for John? We'll go to the police chief report. Chief, you sent around a report early. Very early, nice, over the weekend. Thank you.
Best I could. Big things are, we finally got our fifth vehicle in. We are still looking for a fifth full-time officer. We do have ads out. We've had 2 candidates so far, waiting to see where they sit on things. And we are gearing up for football season. We've got a bunch of contact with the youth by, and we're trying to get everything squared away for that. So, if you have any questions, that's it.
That was a very nice event that you had with the National Night Out. And I know Stephanie helped with that a lot too, and got that all together very nicely, well attended with a lot of kids. It was very good.
And for my further reference, should I bring things like that up today, or should that be next month's report?
Oh, this one.
Yeah, okay, because it happened in August, is the only reason I say that.
Well, it happened before August 13th.
Sure, sure. No, oh, absolutely. We had National Night Out. It was well attended, probably 100 people.
Yeah, 75 to 100.
Served ice cream and water, a lot of small humans involved in it, a lot of great interaction with residents who walked up, both north, south, east and west. It was a good time to have by all, I think.
My favorite was I didn't know your grandchildren were gonna come, and they're really little girls. And the little, like, was she 3?
Yes.
She looked like 3. Grandpa! It was the sweetest thing. Yeah, so many little kids there. It was really great to see. And they showed them the police car, and of course, the golf cart was out. It was very nice up here.
Absolutely. It's a
It worked out
beautiful
very
evening.
nice.
Temperatures were great.
Oh. It was like 70 that day, and it was 100 the day before.
Yep, a lot of people walked up with their children, pulled them in wagons. It's,
Yeah, it
really
was great.
well attended, and it's an enjoyable evening.
Yeah,
Even a lot of.
you did a great job with that.
So,
That-
was a good
Thank
time.
you. Thank you.
Have you got any golf cart permits coming in? Not. Okay. The check with them, let's get close to golf cart season. Yes.
Stephanie, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know that the committee met and has decided to bring to council the recommendation to post the city administrator position. We'd like to post it on September, or post it tomorrow for 10 days. And then we'll hold interviews with the committee and come back with our recommendations to council at the September 10th meeting. We've talked this over with Steve and Steve Cool, as well as Louise and I, and we've talked about using the 5% hotel motel tax. You can use it for any lawful purpose to fund this. Last year, we used this money for, we had a big snowstorm and we used a lot of it for snow removal. And Louise, do you have any more
No, unless council has questions.
questions or comments?
And Steve and Mike, you're gonna be able to get that posted and sent to Lisa.
Yeah, I sent it to you, so.
Oh, you did?
To review, we'll just.
Oh, just a
Oh,
minute
just
ago,
now.
okay.
Take a look.
Gosh, he's quick.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. We'll go on to finance. Now, you sent a report, Nick.
Yeah, just kind of want to keep people in the loop about kind of the trails project. I think the Swisher Track trails look really good. And I think as we've been talking, the plan was kind of to get those trails going, see, have that be a little bit of a model of what we could do with the university property. As everyone knows, Think Iowa City came to a meeting a while back and said that they do. One of the things they do is to say, hey, we've got space, like what could it look like? And so I've been talking to them off and on since that meeting, and they've looked at the trails and they brought some trail people in to kind of get a sense of, you know, what they think of the trails, and they look good, but they, you know, if they would design a trail, they do it in a certain way where it really can help long-term to prevent erosion and things like that. And as Tim, I think, pointed out, I think we were still meeting when we talked about the money in the budget for looking at the trail development and just kind of the University Heights public spaces. And so, yeah, they're looking to kind of run with that a little bit and give some ideas that council could consider. Seems like from the zoning commission meetings, I guess, from what I've seen and just talking to people, there's not desire to do anything too elaborate in the Swisher tract or the university property, but just kind of, so the thought is to bring to council what trails might look like, you know, and what the cost might be, and really the biggest part is what I think what the cost to council would be after Think Iowa City contributions and grants and things like that. So that's, I think we're still on track for that. I also met with Jennifer Horn Fraser and Josh from Think Iowa City. You know, again, just kind of following through with what they had said at that initial meeting of kind of looking at our public spaces, and that's what Jennifer Horn Fraser does. And so again, this is something that that they would be kind of looking at, I think, funding to get to us some ideas, gonna be council's prerogative and be assuming public input and that sort of thing in terms of what might work for the city. But my read of the condo documents here at OUP is that the playground and in front of the space a little bit is a limited common element for the city. So it's something the city could potentially set up a little bit differently, and it might lend itself better for gatherings. I know, like the National Night Out, it's great to have kids here and gathering, but it'd be potentially even better if we had a little bit different infrastructure to facilitate a gathering like that. But that's what these people do, and not necessarily what my expertise is. So I'm curious to see what they have to say. So I'll just keep, I'll keep council involved with that. I don't know if anybody has feedback on that at this point. But I've just really been impressed with Josh and Nick Pfeiffer from Think Iowa City, and I'm sure Tim knows those guys, and You know, they just really seem sharp and on the ball about things, and this is what they do, and this is, I think at the meeting, they explained this, what they've done in North Liberty and Iowa City. So,
Thanks, Nick, for following up with that. It's very exciting.
yeah, I think it could be really neat. The other part of the report, Mike and John and I have talked off and on about how on the audits, we have the issue with not having a proper review of reconciliations and getting dinged by that. So I had reached out to John Olson and started to talk to him about how to really do what he's saying needs to be done in a way that is efficient. And I think, I don't know, I feel like I've come to the conclusion in talking to Mike. I know, John, when you were here the last meeting, but Lori, who used to be treasurer, seemed like a good fit to maybe come in and just be able to check that box. Mike and I both reached out to her and she followed up and does seem to be interested, so. I don't know exactly what the sequence would be and what the expense would be. It would be obviously council's prerogative, you know, but I would recommend that I'd be curious to hear back tonight if people are ready to give feedback, but I'd be kind of curious. If people generally understand what I'm saying in terms of involving Lori. And I guess see if there's an interest to have her do a pretty narrow job, but I think with her background, I'm assuming she could do it pretty efficiently. Because she used to do all these documents, knows what she's looking at. And obviously we could avoid the problem with the audit, hopefully next year
Yeah.
if she got involved.
I agree. I think she'd be very efficient because she really knows the city. She's been with it for 19 and a half years. And also, she was here that one night when we had the chief was voted in, and she said she wanted to be more involved with the city. So I think that's a wonderful idea, come up with that. And she said she's interested.
She's busy right now, I think, with her work, but she
Oh.
did sound interested, but wanted to maybe get a little better sense of it. I would have no idea what the appropriate pay would be for something like
Well,
that.
maybe we could pay her what she had been getting. Or you know what I mean, talk to her, you know what I mean? It was something like 20-some dollars an hour, you know,
Sure.
I'd have to look at it, maybe it's like $25 an hour. Just talk to her and see
Yeah.
what she thinks it would be.
Well, I won't make any offers, but if council's okay, I would say to her, like Louisa
Yeah.
saying, you know,
Let's-
looking at an hourly rate, can you give us a sense of how many hours a month it would take to do this? You could get an audit without
The
that.
rest of the council agree that that's a good idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Sounds good. I will
that's great.
let you know what she says. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And then we'll go to streets and sidewalks, and Ryan, do you want to start?
Sure, I can.
We kind of approved two of these in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, so, I'll just touch on payment items, I guess, first and foremost here, the 2024 pavement marking, we had a, payment for, $1,864.37 on the warrants list. That was basically to get, all the markings complete, paid for. There's still retainage to be released at, with a future invoice. George Street cul-de-sac repairs, so the panels were replaced. There's still some seating work that has to occur. So this isn't a final, pay estimate or invoice for that work, but we did have a change order after they excavated the, street panels and we, took the old intakes out. They discovered some, tile lines that were just, connected into the storm pipes that cross the street, so that pipe had to be replaced, and instead of reattaching it, I guess what I would call blindly underneath the street, I had them rerouted to the intake so that if there's any, so we know that they're there, I guess essentially, so. So the work to kind of core drill the structure and add some new pipe and get it connected is what was included in that change order number 1, which was included in my report. Payment for that invoice, $22,938.70, and that was included in the warrants list as well. Is there any questions on either of those two? from anyone. And then Monroe Street improvements. There is so we have a
Resolution.
right, we have a resolution, so the final pay application was submitted, and this is it's essentially just the release of retainage. We did a final inspection of the sod, which after the maintenance window, and it was in good shape, so. We are recommending, final approval of the project and release the retainage and final acceptance with, resolution number 2434, accepting the project is complete and authorizing payment of retainage before council.
Is there a motion by council?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Nick. Is that with Nick?
Nick,
Okay,
yes.
thank you, Nick. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Steph. Discussion, roll call vote.
John,
Aye.
Herbold.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
Swales.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
I didn't have much more. I mean, on my written report, I did note that, we got a resubmittal of the, parking lot for the hotel, which was approved at last meeting, that with some updates, based off the council's feedback last month. And, approved that site plan, at that time, and I believe they have a building permit now, and they've started some work down there.
Any questions for Ryan? Doug, do you have anything?
No, I think I get them already.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to building, zoning and sanitation, and yours was kind of covered in under mayor's report. Do you have something, Tim, to add?
Nothing additional to the report.
Okay, thank you very much. E-government, Lisa, you sent around a report. Any questions? Yeah, that was a good reminder because Labor Day, you know, it's a Tuesday pickup. It'll be a Wednesday pickup for garbage and recycling. You had a lot of good reminders there, and football will start too. That, any questions for Lisa? Okay, thank you. Any announcements? Okay, is there any objection to adjournment? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned by unanimous consent. Thanks, everyone.